How do we get the people sitting? Does this go over here?
I mean, normally I've been sitting here adjusting the camera.
No, can't do that. It's
Exactly.
gonna have
So
to
it's
have
just going to be
something.
the board.
Okay.
And then
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, all right. Yeah, we can
Okay,
now.
we're now broadcasting live on YouTube.
Good evening, everyone. Let the record show that the time is 5:04. We will now call the Amherst County Board of Supervisors Budget Workshop to order. Let the record show that Ms. Moore is not here, but is attending the meeting virtually. She will be able to listen, will be able to ask questions, and will be able to vote. So having said that, is there a motion to call the meeting to order?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We will now open up for discussion. Mr. Rogers.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm going to stand over here and present this so that I can be seen on the YouTube broadcast. What I intend to do at this point is present to you the presentation that I would like to give to the public at the public meeting that we have yet to plan. The budget that you have in front of you contains everything that you have asked for to date. And so I have every reason to believe that you can approve that budget as presented. And so now I'm going to walk us through that budget. First of all, I have to call it up. First of all, it's important to have two parts. The first is the budget itself. The budget is the approval of the board to the staff to spend money. So you set the categories and the amounts by which we can spend money. That's what the budget is and the function it performs. The plan for the CIP are those three projects, and the staff has approval to proceed with those. All other projects in the plan are just simply planned. We have to come back to the board for approval. Okay. I'd like to review quickly the budget development process that we go through in developing our budget here in Amherst County request. So anything that's going to cost more than $50,000, anything that costs more than $50,000 is separated out as a separate project. And then they are reviewed by staff to make sure there's proper justification, and then prioritized by staff before they're presented to the board. The staff then creates a list of supplemental projects. Any project that costs less than $50,000 or includes personnel goes through the same process. There's a justification is written up, and the entire staff reviews it. They prioritize it before sending it to the board. The next step is that we develop our list of expenses, what it actually costs to turn on the lights and unlock the doors for a year to operate the government. That's what we typically call the O&M budget, so what it costs to operate and to maintain the facilities that we have. We next calculate our revenues, how much money we expect to come in. And it's at that point when we can compare revenues to anticipated expenses that we can see whether there's going to be a shortfall or whether there's going to be money left over in overage. We're generally board, we don't know exactly what they're going to ask for until our initial process is finished. All put together. Sometimes we have to look for additional savings in the budget. Sometimes we can find additional revenues that can be generated. And then, as we are here tonight, that budget is presented and proposed to the Board of Supervisors. So how did we get here? We went through that process. Back in the fall, we developed our CIP supplemental and O&M drafts. We prioritized them, and then beginning in January, we presented them to the board so that the board would prioritize which capital projects were most important, which supplemental projects were most important, and we got the board to agree that the O&M budget, as proposed, was what it cost to do the things that we were expected to do. Then we held budget workshops to talk about some of our more pressing issues. One of those was staff salaries. A market study had been done 2 years ago, and that study was reviewed by the board. We heard from the sheriff, we heard from the public safety director about their challenges in recruiting and retaining people, and they requested adjustments to their pay, and the board decided that it would start their pay at $40,000. We then, taking those as assumptions that we would make those pay adjustments, the board then looked at tax increases. We looked at a 2 cent, 4 cent, and a 6 cent tax increase to handle the initial issues that we had. And we didn't yet have a decision before COVID-19 hit, at which point staff asked for a delay to analyze the effects of COVID-19. And we recalculated revenues, and I'll show you how that was done here in a second, to determine how much money now we expected to come in with the effects of COVID-19. That's now done, and we were required to propose more cuts and raise more revenue, which you'll see in a moment, in order to adjust to COVID-19. So our priorities in going into the process were to maintain level funding for the schools. We were looking at a tax increase to deal with the cost of inflation on government services and to deal with our capital improvement plan. In other words, have money for the future for our capital expenditures. We were also looking at additional personnel in DSS and for CSA, and the clerks needed people, and the registrar needed assistance. So we were looking at additional people. I already mentioned the pay adjustments that were a priority of the board because we were losing people, not able to retain the talent that we had developed, and the public safety and the sheriff are not able to recruit people that we still have open positions for. Pay adjustments were also a priority. Finally, a priority was to maintain the cost of living increase for staff. So the three main challenges that we had were dealing with COVID-19, dealing with inflation, and dealing with the future of the capital improvement plan. Here you can see what our revenues and budget have been for the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And for the most part, you can see that revenues have always stayed ahead of expenses to some degree or another. Some years we're better on revenue than others. We've tried to noodle through why, but it just was. But as you can see, expenses we have always kept below those revenues and have kept them from climbing at a steep rate. Some years our expenses actually declined as we made cuts. Is always rising, the cost of everything that we do, yet our revenues stay relatively the same. Property values do increase slightly as people make additions to their homes, as homes are bought and sold, they get reassessed in that vein, but for the most part, the entire county is not reassessed. And on average, our revenues increase at about 1.5% a year, while our expenses increase at about 2% a year. So eventually, expenses will overtake revenues, and you can see that in 2021, this has happened. And in fact, they've passed expenses, and because of the approximately $525,000 in cuts to the budget, we're still able to balance. So to show you what this budget looks like, you're accustomed to these charts by now. We've projected out from 2016 to 2026, a 10-year period. We're talking about budget year 2021, and you can see the revenues on the blue line and our expenses on the red line. You can see the dip that is occurring there. That's because of COVID-19 and our calculations, which I'll walk you through in a second. And we anticipate that those will, for the most part, pass us by and will be mostly back to normal in generating revenues as of the next fiscal year. And that's when you see the red and blue lines separate again, but not by much. So that inflation then catches us again at the end of 2023 as we head into 2024. And so it's at that point, once again, that we will need to find more revenue. On this slide, you can see the effects on our capital improvement plan. The green line is our required fund balance that we require of ourselves to maintain for financial security, and we never really want to dip below that. The yellow line shows the money that's left over, that's assigned to specific projects, that is committed to specific purposes, and that otherwise is the unobligated general fund balance. And of course, in the 5-year CIP, we plan to spend that over the coming years to replace roofs, parking lots, vehicles, and simply maintain the resources that the county has. Well, there is not a source of revenue coming in to replenish that fund. And as you can see, by 2026, we will then be dipping into our emergency fund in order to cover that. This budget does not address that issue. In discussions with the board, we are waiting to see the effects of COVID-19 before we decide how we're going to deal with that. However, on the agenda for this coming summer, we will be addressing changes to B-poll taxes, the elimination of merchants' capital tax, a cigarette tax, and increases to lodging tax, meals tax, thank you. Increase to meals tax that will help to address this problem. So while the board has put that off, the plan is still to address it here in plenty of time for us to deal with it. So here I'd like to show you the reductions that we took in order to balance because of our COVID-19 reduced revenue. Now, we don't know what that revenue is going to actually be reduced to. Our original estimate on our revenues was there on the top left, $42.9 million. And we're reducing that to an estimate of $42.4 million. And where those reductions were taken, you can see on a quarterly basis there on the left side. So real estate tax is just one total for the whole year, and that's an annual, reducing that by 1%. All real estate taxes eventually get collected, but we're anticipating a delay as people deal with the virus in their businesses. Property tax is the same way, that's an annual amount. But for the most part, real estate tax and property tax are not affected by the virus. Where it is affected in sales tax and meals tax, business license and lodging tax. And you can see that what we've done is reduce anticipated sales taxes by 15% in the first quarter and 10% in the second quarter of this coming year. By the third quarter, we anticipate that we'll be back to normal. Same with meals tax, 40% in the first quarter, 20% in the second quarter, then back to normal by the third quarter. This is consistent with what the financial advisors are telling us and even what the chairman of the Federal Reserve announced just yesterday. So that's why we're using those numbers. Now, reducing the budget is not the entire solution. We've also obtained approval from the Board of Supervisors to increase or bring to them for approval increases in building permits to get our building permit fees up to the same as the surrounding communities as ours, because it's been 10 years since we have increased our fees, and also increased fees for EMS services, for the most part ambulance transportation. Again, we're just coming up to the same level that the surrounding counties are because we haven't looked at it for 10 years. And in each case, that will raise about $75,000, which helped us to reduce the loss due to COVID. Okay, so now I just want to show you, with regard to the requests that came to the Board of Supervisors, what was asked for. On the left side were a variety of supplemental requests. We divide our supplemental requests into two types. One that require just one-time cost, that's a dip into savings to pay for it, and those that require recurring costs, like when we're going to hire a new person, we We've got to pay their salary every year, so we've got to make sure we have that revenue coming in every year. So here's the list of projects that would take one-time expenditure. And you can see that the large number of them that are there, the board, that's in the priority order that the board gave them as their importance to government. And on the right, as you can see, those projects that have been approved by the board. And they are listed there. I guess I go through them. Replace a file server that needs replaced in our IT system. Funding for stretchers that need to be replaced for EMS crews. The high volume air conditioning system in the public safety building, which is out of date. There's no longer parts for that. There needs to be a fire alarm system put into the Madison Heights Library. Public safety vehicle needs to be replaced. Voting machines, poll books, HVAC at the landfill, election officials. This is part-time funding for them to deal with their workload. And it's time to add another inspection vehicle to our fleet and hand the old ones down to other departments. With regard to the projects that would require recurring funding, here again on the left are the projects that were requested of the board and the priority that the Board of Supervisors gave them. On the right are the projects that are approved. The mini grant program is for the beautification committee to help businesses clean up their appearance on the entryways into Madison Heights. Benefits administration with health insurance. We need assistance with that. Comcast Wi-Fi, that is the cost of establishing a Wi-Fi ability here in this public meeting room so that the public can be on Wi-Fi during our meetings. And then the Commissioner of Revenue also needs assistance with part-time staff, so there's funding for her also. With regard to the larger requests, the large expensive ones, here again, they are on the left, prioritized, and on the right, those that are approved. So we're replacing an ambulance, we're continuing our repairs on the Percival Island Bridge, and a Manelson tanker truck replacement refurbishment. That's budgeted at $425,000. I think the numbers are in, and that's going to be about $100,000.
I think I've changed the final draft.
Okay, so I'll present that as $100,000 because it'll be refurbished. Now, in many ways, this is a wait and see budget because we will be looking at revenues and expenses, revenues in particular, as they come in throughout the year are too high. And if revenues are coming in higher than anticipated, we will come back to the Board of Supervisors and ask for some more of these projects to be funded. So if you'll recall, our budget goals at the beginning were to maintain level funding for the schools. We are doing that. We wanted to have a tax increase to deal with inflation and to deal with our future funding of the CIP, but the Board of Supervisors has decided to wait on that and see how COVID affects the community and our revenues before we do that. We were seeking additional people, but the board has decided that we will not have additional personnel. Again, we need to wait and see the effects of COVID. We requested a 3% COLA and proposing a 2% COLA. And finally, the board will be implementing adjustments to pay as they were proposed so that we can stop the hemorrhaging of personnel and talent. So with that, I'll end my presentation and open the floor to questions. If anybody has any questions, or if there's any information you think I left out that I'll need to present when I present this to the public. Because you all are familiar with all of this, of course, having been through the whole thing. But I want to make sure that the public understands why we are where we are.
Board members?
I have no questions, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I would just like to commend staff on a tremendous amount of work on this, getting us where we are today. I mean, it's kind of been all over the place, ups and downs, and I don't think any of us foresaw this COVID-19 pandemic, or but I do appreciate the work the staff has done. I appreciate the work that all of our employees did to help cut the budget to get us to this point. So I don't have any questions. I just have one comment on page 21. 21, 10 on page number 1. Second paragraph, it just kind of stops. Sure, there's present county courthouse was built in 1870 and has.
Well, I'll go back and look at that because I didn't even replace that page, so it's been like that for 2 years. But I appreciate you catching that, so I'll make a note and look at that.
But thank you all for your hard work.
I'll just say that I think Tom said it all there as far as all the work that you all did. I know Stacy was a busy gal, so I appreciate you and your department. I know Mr. Rogers as well. Thank you. It's been tough, but and it's taken a while to get here, but I appreciate your work and what you've done, and all your staff.
Thank you, sir.
I echo what the previous board members have said, and also encourage the public to really dig into this thing, and if they've got questions, ask them. I mean, this book that has been put together is online, is extremely detailed, and if somebody in the public had a pet project and it didn't get funded, or they think that we're not spending revenue the way that we should, we encourage them to ask those questions.
With that, Madam Chair, I would like to thank,
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I wrote it down. Ms. Moore, Mr. Martin just waved at me because I forgot to look at my notes. Did you have any questions or anything you wanted to add?
No, I will echo feedback from staff. They did put in a lot of work. I appreciate that. Relative to Tom's comment, on page 22, we list the major employers, and Johnson Health Center is still on there. I don't know if that needs to be looked at.
I updated that. What in the world?
but we thought we removed CVTC and Johnson Health Center.
Yeah,
So there's a correction.
I'll do it again.
And then on page 22, I'm not sure, I'm sorry, not page 22, 29 through 30, it gives the dates of our meetings. I don't know if that needs to be edited to reflect the, where we took a call for COVID.
We'll take a double look at that, make sure.
I think it only requires that we put in the one we adopted originally, but I can.
Well, let's make it say what we actually did. People aren't gonna understand the difference.
Madam Chair, I think Johnson's Health Center is correct. That is at 130 and 29, the old Taylor Ramsey buildings. That is Johnson's Health. Johnson's Senior Center is one, I think, where the Johnson's Health Center is there at, in Taylor Ramsey building.
Okay.
So you're good on that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can just pull CVTC.
That is correct. But Johnson's Health Center is there at 130, the old Taylor Ramsey building.
I'll learn one day.
So,
Thank you, Ms. Ayers.
so at this point, ma'am, I would like to thank the staff for all the work that they did, because everybody participated in this budget at one point or another, and particularly Stacy Wilkes. This is an entire year's worth of work. It's the principal thing that we do, that we produce, and I'm hoping that we're coming closer to an award-winning product, as I think you can probably tell the difference in this product from what you saw in past years. And that's a goal that I have, that we start winning awards for our budgets, because I think the most important part of this budget is not what's in it. It's the fact that we got here without a lot of contention, that we got here without late nights of debate, that we were, I hope the board appreciates breaking it up into small pieces where we focus on what's important to government and not on the dollars, and we get what's important first. And so with that, I would like to ask the board for a motion to accept this budget and direct staff to present it to the public.
So moved, Madam Chair.
All right, there's a motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion passes.
Thank you, ma'am.
So
Thank you all.
That was for the public hearing.
Yes. Do you want to discuss that?
Yes. Can we, I need advice from the board. Right now, we have reserved for the public hearing on the 2nd of June, a regular Tuesday meeting. You would meet in the afternoon And then we have both the auditorium and the gymnasium reserved at the high school for a public hearing at 7 PM that night. Now, we did that in anticipation of a tax increase. Usually we have a fair amount of the public show up when there's a tax increase. But because there's not a tax increase this year, I question whether we need such a large forum and whether this might be enough seats for the budget that's proposed. How would you like to proceed?
I think this room's probably gonna be large enough. What do y'all think?
I concur.
I would agree. I'd just ask in past years when there's been no proposed tax increase, how's attendance been?
We had 15 people speak at the last tax increase. That was in 2015.
I mean, budgets without a tax.
There's no-
Almost no one shows
Okay,
up.
I think
2 to
this
3.
room would be fine, yeah.
Ms. Moore, the four board members have agreed that this room will suffice. Do you agree as well?
Yes, that's fine.
Works for me. I'll put it into the.
All right.
meeting.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Do you need anything else from us for the workshop?
I don't think so, no.
Board members, are there any other areas of concern? Is there a motion to adjourn the workshop?
So move, Madam Chair.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers, all in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Workshop meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Hey, Sam, give me your flash drive. And we'll put it in.
I'll call you back around 7.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Bye.